Hey, it's Tandy, and we are back with the Common Ground Alaska podcast or Sustainable Alaska podcast. Sorry. And we are going to have a heck of a kickoff. I am so excited about this one. This is a um, project that Gene and I have been wanting to do for years and years and years. And Chris from Chris Outdoors reached out to us and wanted to talk with you guys, with Alaskans, about growing mushrooms in Alaska. And this is something that, boy, we've been thinking about growing mushrooms for a long time. So I'm really excited to have Chris today, and he's going to give us some input about the why and the how, and then he's also going to talk about how you can get more information and really dig into growing mushrooms if you want to grow them on your own.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm always looking for a reason to talk about edible and medicinal mushrooms. I love this topic. So,
Perfect. All right, Chris. So, first of all, just tell us about yourself. Where do you live? What is it that you do?
sure. So I'm in central Ontario, Canada. So some folks may know where Toronto is, so about 3 hours north of Toronto. So we're definitely not in big mountains like you folks, but we are in ancient old rolling hills and forested habitat. I live in a kind of a wilderness area, and my wife and I have a small wilderness homestead. So we strive to, grow and forage and hunt and fish, a good percentage of the food that we eat in the year. And we've got mostly forested property. So our actual growing garden is quite small. It's probably about a quarter acre for growing food. But we do a lot of wild foraging. So going out and foraging both plants and mushrooms. I'm a hunter and a fisherman, and always thinking about sustainability as like the foundation of the way that I approach those kinds of things. And one of the probably biggest things that's been a game changer for being able to produce a lot of food in a small space on our homestead is mushrooms. I'm amazed by, I think about all the different crops that we grow. A lot of them are a lot of work. And there's very few that we're able to put away an entire year's worth of food. Like even our potatoes and squash, like by the springtime, we're kind of running through or stuff starting to go off and then we're starting to buy again. We grow more mushrooms than we can possibly eat in a year. And we put in so little work. It's a couple days a year of work for a more than you can eat supply of mushrooms. So that's one of the reasons I'm so stoked about mushrooms. But beyond that, that wasn't the question about mushrooms. We're going to go there. The question was about who am I and what do I do? So I do a whole host of things. I run a business called Chris Outdoors, chrisoutdoors.ca, because I'm up in Canada here. And, my focus has really been around outdoor education, connecting people with the land. I love teaching people just how to kind of read the story of nature, looking at wildlife tracks and listening to the birds and, what are the birds saying and all that kind of stuff, foraging, survival, all those fun kind of things is a big part of what I do. And then I kind of wear two other hats. The other one is kind of around this more like modern self-reliance thing. So, teaching people about growing food and permaculture, mushrooms, all those types of things. And then I also have another passion around emergency and disaster preparedness. So there's a whole wing, I guess you could say, of Chris Outdoors, where I actually offer both training for individuals, but also consulting for organizations in emergency and disaster planning. And in my mind, all three of those areas of my life are actually completely related. Emergency preparedness is dealing with the emergencies, the disasters, the things that come up in life, and even just being realistic. The world that we're living in, I believe, is changing very quick. I think the next 10 years are not going to look anything like the last 10. So to me, emergency preparedness with this lens is like, how do we adapt and prepare for changes?
Mhm.
Um, and I like to root that in nature, right? Nature and ecology is kind of the foundation that supports our human world, at least on a physical sense. So having a strong understanding of ecology and working with ecology actually helps us be more resilient. And of course, growing food helps us be more resilient as well. So in my mind, those three things, although they might seem disjunct, are actually all very related. And I kind of weave them all into each other in the way that I teach. My wife and I also, actually, I should mention it's more my wife's project, but Laura, she actually runs a sustainably wild forage foods business as well. So that's kind of a fun one. If anyone wants to check that out, it's wildmuskoka.com. And my website is chrisoutdoors.ca. But I'll leave it there as the intro.
Okay, perfect. We'll make sure that we have both those links in the description so that people can find those. And okay, so I'm going to take a step back from your intro. or I'm gonna, because I have some questions about what you said. We'll definitely get into the meat of, and I feel like this is kind of the meat anyway. So, well, first of all, when you talked about disaster preparedness, I think that is such an important subject when you're working on a homestead,
Oh,
because in
absolutely.
this homestead lifestyle, because two things are going on. Number one, you're doing dangerous things. I mean, we're just doing who knows what, you're putting a ladder on top of a ladder to because it's all you've got to get to the roof of the barn to nail on a shingle or whatever you're doing. And when something does happen, most of us live pretty rural. So it's not it takes some serious time for help to arrive. So I think having even just the basics, or the other piece of that is a lot of us spend, like you said, we're spending time out in the woods, we're foraging, we're just being out in the wood, we're being out in it because that's what we enjoy. And so it makes services a lot less available, or harder to get to us. So I just commend everything that you're doing for sure.
Oh, thank
So
you. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, some people, I'd imagine some of your listeners might be familiar with a fairly well-known homesteader down in the U.S. and brand is Melissa K. Norris with Pioneering Today. But her homestead flooded a couple of weeks back. Like it was quite a large incident, right? And of
yeah,
course, you're dealing with flooded gardens, you're dealing with animals, you're dealing with all the food that you've stored. I even know on my homestead, it's like, what do you do if what happens if you have a long-term power outage and you rely on electricity for irrigating your crops or your animals, right? What
mhm,
happens if you spend a ton of your year doing freezing a whole bunch of vegetables and fruit, and then suddenly your freezers aren't working? So emergency preparedness on the homestead is absolutely a foundational piece. So those two definitely interweave with each other.
for sure. Yeah, definitely. All right. So, but you talked about mushrooms, and it just kind of gets me excited just to talk about it because this is definitely a subject we've been wanting to get into. So, tell me first of all, what made you even think, like, what was your like aha moment? Hey, we should start dabbling in growing mushrooms because you said you forage a lot. So at what point did you say, hmm, this foraging isn't quite it. Let's grow some on our own. Like, I'm super curious about that.
Yeah, my journey actually started more with growing, and my first experience, I was actually when I was in my early 20s, so literally 20 years ago, I went and volunteered on a bunch of farms. I think you guys probably have it up in Alaska, the Willing Worker on Organic Farms program. Have you heard of that one before?
I've never heard of that one before.
Oh, it's cool. It's basically like a work trade program where young folks can travel around from farm to farm. Or it doesn't have to be young folks, but folks travel around from farm to farm, and you basically work for room and board. So
Oh,
I did that a bunch when I was in my early 20s to go and kind of learn about growing food and a lot of the stuff I do today. And I ended up on a farm for 8 months on the west coast of Canada, and they grew mushrooms there. So that was kind of my first thing. We had a market garden there, and it was mostly focused on market gardening and a CSA box and all those kinds of things. But they had a guy that would come in, and they had a small eco-forestry operation as well, where we would do sustainable firewood, and we would, cut trees and turn it into like flooring and do some timber framing and stuff like that. But this guy would come in after we went in and did the logging, and he would literally inoculate the stumps with mushroom mycelium. And this
oh,
was like a big like light bulb moment for me because this is doing two things. One, you're creating a secondary crop in the forest, right? Because first we cut down the tree and we're turning that into something that's income producing. Now we inoculate the stump with mushroom mycelium and we go back and harvest the mushrooms. And whether that's for our own food or medicine, or that becomes a crop that we're selling as well, we're now getting more yield out of the same space. But from a sustainability and an ecological perspective, inoculating these stumps with the mycelium actually helps them break down and recycle nutrients faster, which actually helps the surrounding trees grow faster, which makes you a more sustainable forest logging operation in the first place. So it's actually good for the planet and it's good for the people and it's good for the bank account. So that was just kind of like a big like, whoa, I'd never really seen anything like that before in my, experience with gardening. So that was my intro. I left that farm and then it was about 10 years went by where I didn't really do anything with mushrooms. But when my wife and I bought our homestead, which was about 16 years ago now, it was one of the first things that we did because I remember doing that back then. And so we started with inoculating logs with shiitake mushrooms. And pretty quickly, we realized that, a lot of the things that we do on the homestead are a lot of work. Mushrooms are a bit of work up front, but they're almost kind of like interest in a bank account. Like my shiitake logs, I have a set of logs right now that are 9 years old. So I inoculated them once. 9 years later, they're still producing probably a half to three quarters of a pound per year. There is
Wow.
nothing else in my garden that does that with no tending. With the exception of like some of my, like maybe asparagus. Asparagus comes back every year and there's very little tending with it. But like I virtually do no work after the initial setup for the mushrooms. So it's a really, in my opinion, an incredibly great exchange of calories for what you put in to what you get back. And the fact that they're perennial and will come back year after year. Well, if you're growing on logs anyways, there's different techniques.
So specific to Alaska, you're saying they'll come back every year. Do we need to grow them inside or outside?
No, and you should grow. So you can grow both indoors and outdoors, right?
Okay.
In a place like Alaska, I mean, I'd imagine you have a slightly shorter growing season than myself, but I'm in a northern climate as well. Like we're under snow for 4 or 5 months out of the year where I live as well, right? So we
Okay.
have a very short growing season. Um, we're either under snow or we're getting eaten by mosquitoes. There's like 1 month of the year where we don't have snow or we don't have mosquitoes.
That would be us.
Yeah, I figured Alaskans could maybe relate to that as well. So all of that is to say, though, that you can grow outdoors in a short growing season. Now, you're not going to maybe get the full range of species that people can grow in a more southern climate where you have more time. But things like shiitake mushrooms on logs, and even a lot of mushrooms, you can actually get strains that are more cold adapted, right? So when I order we call it spawn. So spawn is kind of, think of it like a seed. Like when you're gardening, you buy seeds to go and plant in your garden. In mushrooms, you buy spawn, which is basically like some substrate like sawdust that's been inoculated with the mushroom mycelium. And then I use that to put into my logs, put into my garden bed, wherever I want to put it. So you can actually buy strains that are better adapted or species that are better adapted to cold environments and that grow relatively quickly so that you can get fruiting even in a climate like Alaska. So for Alaska, I would be thinking probably for outdoor mushrooms, my top three would be shiitake mushrooms. They're quite cold hardy, and the logs can stay out all year long. So you're doing these into logs. Oyster mushrooms, because they're very quick growing. And certain species of oyster mushrooms do really well in even cooler environments. So you often get fruiting kind of in the spring or the late fall. So that's a great one outdoors. And then the other one is wine cap mushrooms, or sometimes called King Strafari mushrooms. And they're fun because you can actually grow these in your garden beds. So you can grow them in wood chips, you can grow them in straw. So in our garden, we have mushrooms just popping up, edible mushrooms. Like in our past, we have them popping up under our squash plants, under our apple tree. And it basically becomes like a perennial mushroom that grows through the mulch in your garden, and then they just kind of pop up all over the place. So all three of those you could grow outdoors in Alaska. A lot of the other species might be a bit tricky with the shorter season, but there's all kinds you can do to grow indoors. Now, growing indoors, there are some safety concerns and a bit of infrastructure, right? Because mushrooms produce spore. You don't want those spores releasing in your house, at least not in large quantities, for health reasons, and because you don't want, mycelium growing in your damp carpet or your damp, damp basement or whatever. But yes, you can grow both outdoors and indoors. And we grow year round. So we have some species that we grow outdoors in the summertime. And then we have a few species that we kind of cycle indoors, the same way that you might grow like microgreens or sprouts indoors in the wintertime while you're waiting for your garden to come back up.
So I think that's part of what I think is fun. Um, and I'm just speaking for myself, and I'm sure that there's two things that I like about what you're saying. First of all, if we do grow them in the summer, they don't take a ton of work. Because the last thing I need is one more thing to do in the summer. Our summers are so short and they're so condensed, and we're trying so hard to make sure that we've grown everything that we need. We're growing out a pig, we're growing out chickens, we're growing out, our garden food. We've got all the things. And we have a farm, a U-Pick farm. We were just incredibly busy. But I love that it doesn't take a ton of work. So it feels like, oh, maybe we could actually manage this, but I also love the idea of growing in the winter because there isn't much we can do in the winter. Like you said, there's microgreens, which we're just starting to do again, which are really nice it's just nice to have some fresh greenery, but to be able to grow mushrooms just feels like, oh, it just maybe makes winter feel a little less wintry. So, so
Yeah, and it's a great way to add some fresh, nutrient-dense food to your diet in the wintertime.
for
And I,
sure.
and I will just to clarify too there, I want to be careful saying not a lot of work because growing the wine caps in the beds actually is not a lot of work. It's quite easy. If you're mulching already, it's just literally a matter of laying down some mycelium. I mean, there's a little bit more to it than that. There's a few tricks to it. Um, Growing shiitakes, let's say on logs or oyster on logs, that is a little bit of work. You need to drop, some tree branches, you need to buck them up, and then you need to inoculate them. But we're talking like, a half day or a day of work for something that's now going to produce for 9 years. And you don't need to do that year after year after year now, right? You could do it every few years. So there is a little bit of initial work, but the return on that initial work is quite amazing.
Okay, yeah, that's fun. So tell us about your course. Now that we've completely gone deep into mushrooms, which was super fun. Tell us about your course. What is it that we would learn if we were to take your course? How long is it going to take? All that.
Sure. Yeah. So I've created an online mushroom course a number of years ago. I'm always experimenting. I'm a DIY guy. I'm not like a nerdy lab scientist. I'm more I'm busy. I'm a homesteader. I need practical stuff that works. So I just kind of started experimenting with all these different things. Like, how do I speed up this process? What's the least amount of work I can do to get away with this? What do I need to put in place so that I don't have contamination or have a high success rate? So I've been, literally playing around with that for the last 16 years. And probably about 6, 7 years ago, I was like, man, I should start just recording all this because I've learned a lot of cool stuff over this. So that slowly evolved into this online course and school that I've created to help people get up and going, both learning how to grow mushrooms as well as starting to understand their role in ecology and being able to identify them in the wild, which then leads to foraging. And foraging mushrooms, of course, is another amazing supplement to your diet and your food. But you absolutely need to know what you're doing. There is quite a few mushrooms out there that will kill you or make you very sick. Some of them look very similar to mushrooms that are very edible. I absolutely encourage people to explore the realm of foraging, but I encourage you to do it slowly. So in the online course that I have, we're basically helping people develop a really solid foundation in both growing and identification skills, which then leads to foraging. And it's kind of fun the way it's laid out right now. There's some very in-depth videos that are broken down into small chunks with basically every aspect. So we teach you, how to grow mushrooms on logs, like what trees can you grow on, what species can you grow on, when to inoculate them, what tools. Like we walk you through everything you need to know for that. There's videos on how to do the garden beds, like with the wine craps. There's also videos on growing indoors. So I talk about how to actually make like systems for indoors and what species again, like basically walk you through all the stuff. And then probably the most important part in my course would be the lessons on safety. So if you're going to grow indoors, how do you make sure that you're doing it safe? And what are all the things that I've learned over the years that actually decrease the amount of work and speed up success rates, right?
Yeah.
Because in my early days of doing mushrooms, I made a lot of mistakes. I had a lot of projects that work. I grew a lot of mold. I don't grow very much mold anymore. Most of my projects work these days. But when you're starting out, there's stuff you just don't know and stuff goes wrong. So there's basically short video lessons walking you through each step of the way. There's a community where you can ask questions. And then a new addition this year that's super fun is I've added this expert live sessions to it. So I'm just working on the 2026 schedule, but last year I think we had 8 expert guests come in to do live sessions. So students can show up live. So all of the lessons are ready to watch. As soon as you join up, you can just go and start watching lessons, start learning. I even tell you where to go get your equipment so you can just get growing right away. But the expert live sessions are kind of what keep you inspired throughout the year. And you can come in, and I'm bringing in people that bring in really fun things. We did an intro to foraging live session. Or spring foraging. We did an intro to fall foraging. We did a getting ready for the indoor growing season session. We actually had one last night and it was all on cooking with mushrooms, but how to do so in a way that pulls out the medicinal benefits of them in the best way. So last night we had an expert come in and we did a deep dive into like, how do you preserve mushrooms? And then how do you store them and cook with them? So those are the kinds of things we do in the expert sessions where I bring in different people to share their expertise. And then students actually get to ask their questions. And then all the replays are stored in there. So that's kind of the essence of the course. There's that. And then, of course, there's all those same things I described for the growing. We also have those for understanding mushroom ecology. And then we're starting to build a database of common mushrooms that can be found across North America and talking about how to identify them, where their habitat is, all those kinds of things. So that's all what's included inside of the course.
I am so excited. I meant to sign up for the course before we did the podcast recording just because I'm curious and I'm excited about it. But the holidays came and now here we are. So I'm excited definitely to be part of it. And you made us a coupon code. You made a coupon code just for our people. Is that correct?
I did, yeah, yeah. So Alaska 25. And if you go to themushroomcourse.com, themushroomcourse.com,
Okay.
that's where the sign up page is. And if you put Alaska 25, you'll get 25% off. And if you forget that URL, you can also just go to chrisoutdoors.ca. You'll probably put it in the show notes as well there. So that's where people can get access to the course there, where we walk you through like kind of all the the nitty-gritty details of all this kind of stuff and help
Yes.
you get upset. And my goal for the course, I guess I'll say this one thing. If people want to just be a hobbyist and just have some fun, it'll be great for learning. Even if you're a homeschool parent and you're looking for a really cool project to do with your kids, it could be a really awesome learning opportunity because there's so much even to learn about mycelium because there's such an important species in the Earth's ecosystem, right? Symbiotic relationships with plants, they're decomposers of nutrients and nutrient recycling. So it's a great learning opportunity for students and for kids. Um, or if you're a serious homesteader and you're thinking about self-sufficiency, my goal would be that after going through these course lessons, you can actually learn to grow an entire year worth of mushrooms, even in a fairly small space. And even if you live in an urban environment, you can absolutely still grow in small urban areas with mushrooms as well, which is really fun.
That part's really fun too, because space can be definitely be an issue for a lot of people. Even for us, we have 10 acres, but I feel like I have to just be careful with every little section. So
Mhm.
that the fact that we can do it in a small space is helpful. So, Chris, I'm also very excited. Let's see, we're recording today's January 8th, so about a month from today, actually on my birthday on February 9th, you are going to be giving a free class to our listeners. Is that correct?
Yeah. This is going to be
Yeah.
fun. I mean, this podcast today is a real surface level. Hopefully, we're getting people kind of inspired, letting them know it's possible. In the free class that we're going to do, the webinar there, we'll go a little bit more in depth, where I'll start kind of talking about the different techniques a little bit more and how to get set up. We'll definitely do a bit of a deeper dive into mycelium and what mushrooms are and how they grow, because you need some of that foundational knowledge to be able to do it successfully. It's also, you'll find that it's just quite fascinating. So yeah, we're going to do that free webinar. So hopefully people will sign up. Maybe we'll put the link for that in the show notes as well, I guess.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
We'll
and
make
then
sure
if people
we
want
got
to
that
come and
ready. Yep.
join us for a little bit more of an in-depth session, then we'll do that one as well.
Yeah, and that's totally free too, which I appreciate because I know that these things take time. And when you're running a business, time is not our most available commodity. So I really appreciate you taking the time to just kind of give this overview because I know for me, mushrooms are something we've thought about for a long time. So I'm just ready to be all in now. Um but for a lot of people when this is kind of introductory, you're kind of sitting on the fence. And so to be able to spend some, an hour or so with you and learn a little bit more, then I think it's going to help people make a decision. Do I really want to jump into this? Do they want to do it now? Do they want to do it later? Kind of thing. And just the community that we're able to build. I think that'll be really fun. So
Yeah, we can definitely answer some custom questions on that call too if people want to ask. Yeah.
perfect. I love it. So this is kind of what we're actually doing is we're partnering not only with Chris, but we're partnering with Far North Fungi, which is a company out of they're in the Eagle River area. And what I'm excited about is I feel like we're here to give you the whole Alaska mushroom experience. So Chris is here to give you the online course, which I'm super excited about because then we have the ability to kind of go back and like if something's not going right, you can go back and rewatch a class. Or I know I've before like I'll go to a class and I get all excited and then I come home and I'm like, I don't remember all of it. So with an online class, or with an online course, then you can go back and rewatch it. You can take your own notes and things like that. But we're also offering, and I have to look up the date and I apologize. March 21st at the Big Lake Recreation Center, we're partnering with Far North Fungi, and we're going to be doing a class. It'll take a couple hours where you actually learn a little bit about growing mushrooms, and then you get to inoculate your own log and take it home.
Oh, fun.
So if a person had your class, Chris, and had watched it or had it available, and then was able to attend this in-person class, I feel like we could just run with it because, we're learning from you. We're learning from the folks at Far North Fungi who are brilliant and who are up here so they can answer the more little idiosyncrasies, specific to growing in Alaska. And I just feel like we're getting like this education, the best of the best. So we'll have
Yeah, I
links.
love that combination. And you know what? I
Yeah,
teach in-person mushroom classes here in Ontario, and I always include my online course as part of the registration. And I get tons of feedback because just like you said, people show up to the in-person class, they'll go home to do it, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I forget all these little things. Like there's so
right.
much to it." So then they're
Yep.
able to go back to the online course, and it's all there. They can come and ask me questions. Same with the foraging walks, like my wife leads these foraging walks all the time through her business through Wild Muskoka. But at the end of the walk, you've learned so many mushrooms and your head's just spinning. And then you're like, oh my goodness, there's no way I could go out and do this confidently on my own. So then to be able to go back and here's my wife now on video talking really slow, re-showing all the parts, and then you can refresh it. And I find a lot of people will actually go back and watch the same lessons multiple times so everything can sink in and new little layers come. So I think that's great what you have going on there. Do they sell mushroom grow kits, that company by chance?
They do, they do. So we'll make sure that we have the link for that as well. So if
Yeah,
folks
because
take,
they'd be able to use anyone that signs up for my online course. You could buy one of the mushroom grow kits from that company up in Alaska there. But then
uh
what I teach you, because a lot of people, so mushroom grow kits are meant, they're usually like a plastic bag with mycelium, and you cut them up and then mushrooms grow out of it. What I teach people to do is basically use that bag like you would a pack of seeds. So instead of just growing, two or three flushes out of that grow kit, you actually now use that as a seed and you inoculate 100 bags or you inoculate, 30 logs or whatever.
nice.
And that's how all of a sudden you're getting more self-sufficient, you're increasing your food security. Yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that we teach in the class. But that would be great if people could get a local source of kind of the mushroom seed or mycelium. And then they could use my course to learn what to do with that to actually grow that out and keep it going.
Absolutely. I think I'm super excited with your willingness to work with us and what we've been able to put together. So and we're going to be doing this right alongside of all of our all the listeners. So that'll be fun too. Maybe we'll have to have some sort of group or something so we can talk through things as we go, that didn't work like we thought, or look what I did, look what I grew. So very good. Okay, so Chris, what am I missing? What else should we talk about before we wrap things up?
I mean, I feel like we've laid out a pretty good foundation here. Actually, one thing that might be worth just sharing with folks too, sometimes people actually don't realize how nutritionally dense mushrooms actually are as well. And we'll talk about this a little bit around the webinar. But when I grew up, I just thought of mushrooms as like the little white cremini mushrooms that you buy at the grocery store and you cut them up on a salad or put them on an omelet. And they're not the most nutritionally dense, those white creminis, although there is some nutritional value. But when you start getting into the realm of like shiitake and lion's mane and all these other mushrooms, you'd actually be amazed. Like a lot of them are super high in protein. Some of them are very high in vitamins. Like eating shiitake mushrooms is like taking a vitamin D supplement, and especially us in the northern climate, many people in the north are deficient in vitamin D. Mushrooms are a great natural way to get a vitamin D. If you spend money on vitamin D supplements, you may actually be able to save money by growing your own mushrooms and eating enough mushrooms that you don't need to take a vitamin D supplement again. So
Very good.
there's incredible nutrient density to mushrooms that people don't realize. They can actually be quite calorie dense as well, like quite meaty. And then, of course, we haven't even got into the wide spectrum of medicinal research that's coming out there. And I'm talking about like scientifically documented peer-reviewed studies that are supporting the use of mushrooms for supporting everything. And it's, there's specific mushrooms, specific doses. It's not just like mushrooms are going to cure all your ailments. I'm not making that claim by any means.
Right.
But there's all kinds of scientific data showing that certain species of mushrooms used in certain ways are incredibly promising in supporting everything from people with like Alzheimer's to recovering from concussions, supporting people recovering from cancer or doing chemotherapy, just generally supporting energy levels and brain function and day-to-day life. Like it's pretty phenomenal, the medicinal spectrum within the mushroom realm as well. So
Mm.
maybe that would be just another little seed to plant if people weren't aware of that. What amazing herbal allies they are, I guess I could say.
Yeah, I think mushrooms are kind of a powerhouse that are kind of unrecognized. So it's going to be fun to dig in and learn more for sure. Chris, I appreciate you taking the time today. We'll put the links to all of these things plus the discount code so you can get the discount if you want to sign up for Chris's online course. And we'll get all of that in the show notes so folks can go back and read. And again, if you're watching, if you're enjoying this, we ask that you follow us on Facebook. On Facebook is Common Ground Alaska Farm. We ask that you hit follow if you're listening on YouTube or on Apple Podcast. And then, Chris, actually, I should ask this: where can we find you?
Yeah, so my main website is chrisoutdoors.ca. So if like the emergency preparedness consulting and I run a number of other different online courses as well. You can check that all out at chrisoutdoors.ca. The wild forage food business is wildmuskoka.com. And then themushroomcourse.com is where the online course is, and Alaska 25 is the 25% off coupon code there.
Okay. And are you on social media at all, or do you just stick with?
I'm personally not a social media guy. So Wild Muskoka is so at Wild Muskoka. If you want to see some of our cool creations, wild foods and foraging and stuff, check out at Wild Muskoka on Instagram. I do have a YouTube channel, so if you look up Chris Outdoors ON, I actually have quite a number of videos on there, and there's some great mushroom ones on there. I just don't post that frequently on it. I'm not really a social media guy anymore. My main focus is actually through my newsletter. Oh, and I do write about the nature connection survival stuff on Substack. So if you find Chris Outdoors ON on Substack, that's probably one of the main avenues I'm using to kind of share what I share with the world.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Chris. And I'm really excited for February 9th. And not just because it's my birthday, but because we're going to be talking about mushrooms some more.